In the year 332 BC, the city of Tyre laughed at Alexander the Great. As the conqueror of the known world stood on the Phoenician coast, the Tyrians watched from the safety of their island fortress, an impregnable bastion 800 meters out in the open sea. Its walls, 45 meters high, rose directly from the waves, having defied every empire that had tried to subdue them. They denied Alexander the honor of making a sacrifice in their temple, a gesture of defiance veiled as an offer of compromise. They saw a land-based general, however brilliant, who was powerless before the might of the sea. They did not know they were dealing with a man who did not negotiate with destiny, but wrote it himself. Alexander's response was not diplomatic, nor was it even naval. It was geological. To the disbelief of his engineers and the mockery of his enemies, he issued the most audacious and seemingly insane order of his career. If the city would not come to him, he would bring the land to the city. He would not attempt to sail to its walls, but would walk to them. He ordered his army to build a causeway, a land bridge across the sea to transform the island into a peninsula. It was an act of such monumental arrogance that it challenged nature itself, a declaration that not even the geography of the planet would stand in the way of his will. The laughter on the walls of Tyre would soon turn to a silence of dread. Alexander conquered the unconquerable because he refused to play by the rules of warfare or reality. His victory at Tyre was not just a feat of military strength, but the product of a maniacal obsession and monumental engineering that redefined the limits of the possible. The key to his triumph was his ability to transform an insoluble naval problem into a land-based problem his army could solve. When the sheer force of engineering proved insufficient, he adapted relentlessly, building a navy from scratch to wage total war by land and sea. The Siege of Tyre is the story of how the will of a single man proved to be a force of nature more powerful and persistent than the ocean itself. The protagonist of this saga is Alexander the Great, at the zenith of his power and self-confidence. He has just won a crushing victory against the Persian army at Issus, and his belief in his own divine destiny is absolute. Tyre's refusal to allow him to sacrifice to Heracles in their temple is not a mere strategic setback for him. It is a personal insult, an affront to his honor and his connection to the gods that cannot go unpunished. His motivation becomes visceral. It is not just about securing his rear, but about proving to the entire world that no wall, no island, and no sea can resist the will of Alexander. The siege becomes a matter of cosmic pride. His army is the perfect instrument for his terrestrial ambition. Some 35,000 Macedonian veterans, hardened by years of campaigning, disciplined, and utterly loyal to their king. Among them are the finest military engineers of the ancient world, men capable of building the most formidable siege engines ever seen. However, this formidable army has a crucial and seemingly insurmountable weakness for the task ahead. It has no significant navy. They are lions on land, but they face an enemy protected by the dominion of the sea, a realm where their power is, in theory, useless. The question is how a land general can conquer a naval fortress. The giant of this story is the city of Tyre itself. Its ruling council and its citizens are imbued with a confidence that borders on arrogance, and with good reason. Their island city has never been taken by force in its long and proud history. They have complete faith in their formidable defenses, walls that rise directly from the sea, making a conventional amphibious assault impossible, and one of the most powerful navies in the Mediterranean, with some 80 triremes and other warships controlling the surrounding waters. For them, the sea is not an obstacle. It is their greatest and most powerful wall, an ally that has always protected them from continental tyrants. Tyre's fatal weakness, however, is a profound lack of imagination. They prepared for a war they understood, a naval blockade or an attempted amphibious assault that their fleet could easily repel. The idea that someone could literally fill in the ocean to reach them was so insane, so far outside the bounds of conventional military strategy, that they simply did not consider it a serious threat. They underestimated not the strength of Alexander's army, but the scale of his obsession. They believed they were facing a king, when in reality they were facing a force of nature with an iron will. Their arrogance prevented them from seeing that the rules of war were about to be rewritten. Alexander's true enemy is not the soldiers of Tyre, but the battlefield itself, the 800-meter strait of water separating the island from the mainland. It is not a calm, body of water. It is a deep channel in places, subject to strong currents and violent storms that can arise without warning. Any structure built in it would be at the mercy of the sea's fury. The ocean becomes the city's main defender, an active and relentless adversary working day and night to undo the efforts of the Macedonian engineers. To conquer Tyre, Alexander would first have to conquer the sea, an element that no army has ever subdued. It is here that Alexander executes his stroke of genius, an act of audacity that redefines siege warfare forever: the construction of the mole. He orders his men to build a causeway 60 meters wide, stretching from the coast to the island's walls. The project is on a titanic scale. They use the rubble of the old city of Tyre on the mainland, demolishing it to cast its stones into the sea. Thousands of logs from the legendary cedars of the Lebanese mountains are felled and transported to reinforce the structure. To see how this engineering madness becomes a weapon of war and to witness the most audacious siege in history, subscribe to our channel and activate notifications, because the battle between one man and the ocean is about to begin. The construction of the mole begins, a Herculean effort that consumes weeks. Thousands of soldiers become laborers, hurling rocks and timber into the sea under the mocking gaze of the Tyrians. But as the causeway pushes deeper into the channel and closer to the city walls, mockery turns to concern, and concern to action. The Tyrian fleet comes into play. Their swift and maneuverable ships make constant raids, harassing the Macedonian workers with a rain of arrows and catapult projectiles. Work slows, and casualties mount. The siege has become a battle of engineering under constant fire. Alexander, as always, responds to escalation with innovation. To protect his men and provide covering fire, he orders the construction of 2 immense siege towers at the end of the mole. Standing 50 meters high, these wooden structures are the tallest ever built, veritable skyscrapers of antiquity. Equipped with their own catapults and ballistae, they dominate the city walls and keep the Tyrian ships at bay. The construction of the mole resumes under the protection of these gigantic mobile fortresses. It seemed that Macedonian engineering had overcome Tyre's naval challenge, but the Tyrians respond with a counterattack of diabolical brilliance. They take an old horse transport ship and convert it into history's first fire ship. They load it to the brim with the most flammable materials they can find: pitch, sulfur, resin, and dry wood. On its bow, they hang cauldrons filled with burning liquid. It is a hell burner, an infernal weapon designed not to fight, but to burn. They wait for a strong wind to blow towards the mole, and then set their plan in motion, a plan that will change the course of the siege. In a perfectly coordinated attack, they tow the fire ship towards Alexander's 2 siege towers. At the last moment, its crew sets the cargo ablaze and escapes in small boats. The burning ship, driven by wind and waves, crashes with tremendous force into the end of the mole. The impact is devastating. The fire spreads instantly to the 2 wooden towers, which become gigantic torches. At the same time, Tyrian ships attack from all sides, while their soldiers land on the mole to slaughter the confused Macedonians and destroy their other siege engines. The disaster for Alexander is total and absolute. His 2 magnificent towers, the pride of his engineers, collapse into an inferno of smoke and ash. A significant part of the mole, the work of months of superhuman effort, is destroyed by fire and waves. From the walls of Tyre, cheers echo across the water. They have achieved a spectacular victory. They have humiliated Alexander and proven that the sea is their invincible ally. For any other general, this would have been the end. The task already seemed impossible, and now, after this catastrophic setback, it had become insane. But this disaster does not break Alexander. It transforms him. His determination hardens into a maniacal obsession. He realizes his fundamental mistake. He cannot take an island city without controlling the sea. The lesson has cost him dearly, but he learns it. Instead of abandoning the siege, he decides to double down in a way no one could have foreseen. If he does not have a fleet, he will build one. Or rather, he will assemble one. He leaves part of his army to begin rebuilding the mole, this time wider and stronger, and embarks on a personal mission. Alexander travels to Tyre's rival Phoenician cities, such as Sidon, Byblos, and Arwad, which had already surrendered to him. Using a mix of diplomacy, threats, and promises, he convinces them that it is in their interest to join his cause against their old competitor. He also secures ships from Cyprus and other regions. In a matter of months, through the sheer force of his will and reputation, he achieves the impossible. He returns to Tyre not as a land general, but as the admiral of a vast fleet of over 200 warships. He has leveled the playing field in the most spectacular way possible. The arrival of Alexander's fleet is a devastating psychological blow to Tyre. Suddenly, their greatest advantage, control of the sea, is gone. The hunters have become the hunted. The new and powerful Macedonian navy blockades Tyre's two harbors, trapping the Tyrian fleet inside. Now, the siege enters its final and most brutal phase. With naval control secured, Alexander's engineers can work on the rebuilt mole unmolested, bringing new and even more formidable siege engines to the walls. Alexander's strategy is now one of total war. The rebuilt mole, now wide enough for several siege towers, hammers the city's northern walls. At the same time, his fleet attacks from the sea. Some of his ships have been equipped with rams, turning them into the first naval assault platforms in history. They sail along the walls, testing different sections for a weak point, while other ships filled with soldiers attempt to storm the sea defenses. Tyre is completely surrounded, besieged by land and by sea. Finally, after 7 brutal months of siege, the breakthrough comes. While the siege towers on the mole focus the defenders' attention on the north, one of the ram-equipped ships manages to open a breach in a section of the southern wall. It is the opportunity Alexander has been waiting for. True to his style, he does not send his men. He leads them. He boards one of the assault ships and is among the first to cross the gangway and enter the city through the breach, fighting hand-to-hand atop the walls. The fall of the city is swift and bloody, with Alexander and his elite hypaspists inside the city from the south, and with other forces storming the walls from the mole in the north. Tyre's defenses collapse. The Macedonian soldiers, enraged by the length of the siege and the heavy losses suffered, flood the streets. The Tyrian resistance, though brave to the end, is crushed. The impregnable city, the jewel of Phoenicia that had laughed at empires, has finally fallen. The siege of Tyre is perhaps the greatest demonstration of Alexander's genius. It was not just a victory, but a masterclass in adaptation and perseverance. When his initial plan failed spectacularly, he did not give up. He analyzed the problem, identified his weakness, and corrected it on a monumental scale. He transformed an almost certain defeat into his most audacious triumph, proving that his mind was a weapon more powerful than any catapult, and his will a force more relentless than any ocean. The conquest of Tyre was not just the fall of a city. It was the assertion that for Alexander the Great, nothing was impossible. Alexander's revenge for the 7 months of defiance was as terrible as his determination had been. The fall of the city unleashed a calculated fury in his troops. During the battle and the subsequent slaughter in the streets, an estimated 8,000 Tyrian defenders and citizens were killed. The Macedonians, who had lost some 400 men during the long siege, showed no mercy. The city that had resisted so proudly was subjected to a brutal lesson on the cost of defying Alexander. The stench of death and smoke took over the legendary island fortress, a grim testament to the price of arrogance. But the carnage did not end with the battle. For the survivors, the fate was, in many ways, worse than death. Alexander ordered the remaining 30,000 citizens, men, women, and children, to be sold into slavery. An entire civilization, with its rich culture and long history, was eradicated or dispersed in a single day. The city itself, the commander that had led the resistance, was plundered of its immense wealth and then set ablaze. In a rare act of mercy, Alexander spared King Azamilchus and a few other nobles who had sought refuge in the sacred temple of Melkart. But for the rest of his people, there was no salvation. The destruction of Tyre was a brutally clear message to the rest of the world. Resistance to Alexander was not only futile, but would be punished with total annihilation. The 7-month siege, which had begun as an act of offended pride, ended as an act of strategic terror. Alexander had shown that he could not only overcome any physical obstacle, but was also willing to wipe an entire society off the map to achieve his goals. The fall of Tyre was not just a military victory, it was an act of creation and destruction on a divine scale, leaving a city in ruins and a warning that would resonate throughout his growing empire. The most important strategic consequence of the fall of Tyre was the annihilation of Persian naval power in the Mediterranean. Tyre was the great king's most powerful and loyal naval base, and its destruction meant that the Persian fleet no longer had a safe harbor from which to operate. This secured Alexander's lines of communication and supply, eliminating the threat of a naval counterattack in Greece or to his rear as he pushed deeper into Asia. With the sea under his control, the path to Egypt was clear, and beyond it, to the heart of the Persian Empire. The siege became a legend, a case study in determination, adaptation, and multi-domain warfare that would be studied by generals for millennia. For the legend of Alexander, the siege of Tyre became the ultimate proof of his belief in his own near-divine destiny. It was not a battle against men, but a war against nature itself. He challenged and defeated the sea god, Poseidon, whom the Tyrians believed protected them. This act of defying the elements and literally reshaping the earth to suit his will cemented his reputation as a man for whom the word impossible simply had no meaning. He became the embodiment of human will, triumphing over any obstacle, a story that proved he was more than a mere mortal. He was a force of destiny. The siege also encapsulates every facet of Alexander's genius in a single event. It shows his strategic brilliance in identifying pride as his enemy's weakness. It reveals his unparalleled engineering prowess and his ability to motivate his men to perform superhuman tasks. It demonstrates his astonishing tactical flexibility, shifting from a land siege to a full-scale naval campaign mid-battle. It displays his legendary personal courage, leading the final charge himself. And finally, it reveals his terrifying, ruthless cruelty in punishing those who dared to defy him. The Siege of Tyre is not just one of his battles, it is the microcosm of his entire legend. The scale of the engineering achievement alone is enough to place the Siege of Tyre in the pantheon of human feats. The construction of a causeway nearly a kilometer long across the open sea, under constant fire, using only human labor and rudimentary tools, is an accomplishment that rivals the building of the pyramids. It was a testament to the organization, logistics, and sheer determination of the Macedonian army, driven by the ambition of its leader. The victory was not just military, it was a triumph of science and will over the forces of chaos, an act of imposing a brutal, rational order on a reluctant world. The scar of Alexander's obsession is visible to this day. The mole that his soldiers built with blood, sweat, and the remains of a demolished city was never removed. Over the centuries, the sea currents that had once tried to destroy it began to work in its favor. Slowly, inexorably, they deposited sand, silt, and sediment on both sides of the man-made structure. The defeated sea completed the work Alexander had begun, widening and solidifying the connection between the ancient island and the mainland. Geography, in the end, surrendered to history. As a result, the ancient island of Tyre is no longer an island. Today, it is a peninsula, permanently joined to Lebanon by a broad isthmus of land. The scar of Alexander's 7-month war, literally and forever, changed the map of the world. A visitor can now walk from the mainland to the old fortress without getting their feet wet, following the path that a god-king carved across the ocean more than 2 millennia ago. It is the most powerful and enduring reminder of Alexander's legacy, a man whose ambition was so vast and whose will was so relentless that he not only conquered kingdoms, but also reshaped the very face of the earth.